morning to you all. Welcome to CSSS Colloquium's yet another session. Today I'm really glad to have with us Professor Amit Kumar Sharma. He's our colleague, and he has been, we have been actually requesting to him to present his ideas, and really happy to see that he's going to present today on cinema and sociology in India. It's a very pertinent topic. We all know that cinema is somewhat a marginal kind of an idea within the discipline of sociology and anthropology in India, and he has been one of the rarest of scholars within these disciplines who engage with the questions in cinema and media. Professor Amit Kumar Sharma joined this department, the center, in September 2002, and his areas of research and teaching interests include political sociology, semiotics, semiology, cinema and culture in India, and religious studies. He's the author of nearly 6 books, bilingual books, both in English and Hindi, and one of his books on this particular topic, on the institutionalization of sociology and cinema, is forthcoming. Apart from that, a few books include titles like Symbols of Kinship Identity in North India, Religion and Culture in Indian Civilization, Structure of Indian Society, that is one of the earliest publications, 2003, and he's actively working on this parallel lives of Indian sociology as an institutionalized discipline in India, and also the inception and development of cinema as a cultural site in Indian civilization. That is the anchorage through which he is trying to analyze both cinema and sociology in the Indian context. Welcome you, and please have 50 minutes almost, then we can have a discussion.
15 or 50?
50.
Thank you, Harish. Thank you,
it's
friends. It is not a very structured seminar because only last week Vivek and Rathi's persuaded me to give a talk. At the moment I am busy in reading the final proof of my 3-volume books which are coming. The first volume will come last week of March, but I think it will be released in April. And the second book will come in 2021, and the third will come in 2022. Although the full manuscript is ready, but there is also economics of publishing. Therefore, this seminar is actually a chapter in the 3rd volume, and I am still finalizing it. But as we were told in Delhi School of Economics that there is a major difference between a lecture, which is a finished product, and seminar, which is a working paper in progress. Therefore, I expect comments and critique so that my epilogue, that is the Upsanghar in Hindi of the 3rd volume, becomes richer. I am glad that 2 of my best friends are here, Professor Susan Viswanathan and Harish.
I am not your friend.
You are my colleague, very respected colleague. Harish was a friend since 1984, and during the same time I met Susan. She was teaching in Hindu College. In some sense, this is a very ambitious book which I am trying to write, and I must say, this seminar presents some of the insights I have gathered as a student of sociology since 1979. The year I joined JNU as a student was 1986. The year I joined as a teacher here was 1999. September 2002 is the year I became associate professor, and I am still associate professor, and I am enjoying it because I am a Buddhist. Now, the thing which I wanted to discuss with you is divided into basically three sections. The first is some sort of contextualization of sociology as a global discipline. This is the written part, and I will read it, and then there are two sections which are partly written and partly not well written. And the official historians of the modern universities in the Anglo-Saxon world and their colonies have created a myth, and it has been transmitted over generations as the authentic history of the modern world, traced through Italian Renaissance, German Reformation, industrial revolutions in Catholic countries of Spain, Portugal, Holland, the French Revolution, and the Protestant industrialization in England and France. The common element in all these processes were ideas and their symbolic representations in art and architecture, painting and sculpture, that is Renaissance, a new interpretation of the God and the world, a new theology of the Mass, Christian Mass, and a new framework of the moral relationship between the individual person and the divinity Jesus represented in the old world of Europe, that is Reformation. The Catholic industrial revolution of the 16th century was understood to be driven by the white man's burden to civilize the others in Latin America, Africa, and some parts of Asia. The Protestant industrial drive in the 18th century made the civilization mission much more sophisticated and economically efficient. The French Revolution of 1789 and the French Enlightenment of the 18th century glamorized the ideas of liberty, equality, and fraternity by inventing a new concept of the moral individual as a sui generis monad, which Leibniz was talking about, called the citizen. The complementary readings by Edmund Burke, Tocqueville, and Marx provided the academic platform for Auguste Comte, Herbert Spencer, and Adolphe Bastien to envision three different types of sociologies in France, England, and Germany. The mega synthesis by Emile Durkheim, Max Weber, and Talcott Parsons, available in the English language by the 1970s, became the foundation of major departments of sociology in India. By 1986, we had two major attempts to canonize the official history of Indian sociology. One, Indian Sociology by Yogendra Singh, 1986, and the other, complementary volume by Singh, Ideology and Theory in Indian Sociology, which was published in another name, Image of Man, but I do not know why that has been omitted, and now it is called 2004. Image of Man appeared in 1999, I think. The other major historical or official history of sociology was written by Ramakrishna Mukherjee in 1979. It was called Sociology of Indian Sociology. The influence of Yogendra Singh overshadowed the better documented book by Ramakrishna Mukherjee due to several interrelated factors. Now, in a recent book, Anna Plessart had forcefully reminded us, this book was published in 2015, Anna Plessart forcefully reminded us that the Scottish Enlightenment offered an alternative and equally powerful imperative framework of the modern revolution in Europe. The Scots, in their alternative interpretation, focused on the transformation of the polite, civilized morals that had defined modernity. The Edinburgh intellectuals of the 18th century, particularly David Hume and Adam Smith, observed that the real historical significance of the French Revolution in particular and the modern enterprise of civilization in general lay in the transformation of warfare, national feelings, and the relations between states, war, and commerce that characterized post-revolutionary modernity and the international order. In another path-breaking joint endeavor, the contributors to the Cambridge Companion to the Scottish Enlightenment, edited by Alexander Brodie, had reanalyzed the works of David Hume, Adam Smith, Thomas Reid, Adam Ferguson, and Colin McLaurin to understand the genealogy of the modern and modernization process in historical detail. Another author, Arthur Herman, the book was published in 2002, How the Scots Invented the Modern World, presents a much more coherent argument that instead of ideas and representations, commercial interest and competitions among the institutions have led to the transformations in the institution of traditional war as the final solution of emergent conflicts, competitions, and crises. This transformation was rooted in pagan ethos and led to the development of community sentiment devoid of territory. In the course of time, it led to the modern nation-state and the semi-autonomous moral individual. In the 20th century, cinema became a much more sophisticated weapon of war by other means. Not so much in Europe as in the United States of America and Asia. American cinema from the very beginning was linked with Pentagon and the armament industries. The Jews of German origin controlled the armament industries, major financial institutions including banking in the USA. The migrant Jews from Russia and Eastern Europe became the pillars of Hollywood. B.K. Sarkar, the founder of Calcutta School of Sociology, drew on the ideas of German Romanticism, French Positivism, and the Indian Swadeshi movement to combat British Orientalism and Indology that emphasized the otherworldly, the spiritual distinctiveness of India. Sarkar emphasized the materialist, positivist, non-mythical aspects of Indian science and culture. Sarkar also emphasized the continuity between the folk and the classical traditions in India. Around the same time, Anand Kumar Swamy combated Western depreciations of Indian art as crude and non-realistic and conceptually reconstituted the sacred symbolism and intellectual aspects of Indian art. Kumaraswamy too emphasized the continuity between folk and classical traditions in India. Indian cinema had by this time already developed in continuity with the storytelling traditions of pre-modern India, as well as in continuity with the artistic conventions of iconic representation and non-realism in the temple. This is the first part of my presentation. The second part I think I will omit because I will not be able to cover within the time. It was about Hollywood and Christianity. I am coming to Indian cinema now. Now there are two histories of sociology in India. One is the official history, which says that Indian Sociology Department of Bombay was started in 1919, and the other is the history provided by Ramkrishna Mukherjee in Sociology of Indian Sociology, which says that the Department of Sociology in Kolkata emerged gradually, slowly, after the Swadeshi movement in Bengal. Now, very few of us are familiar with the Kolkata School of Sociology, and the reason is not very simple. As I said, Ramkrishna Mukherjee's book Sociology of Indian Sociology was published by Allied Publishers in 1979, and Yogen Singh's book was published in 1986. But why we do not know much about the Calcutta School of Sociology or Lucknow School of Sociology, and why we know much more about Bombay School of Sociology and Delhi School of Sociology? I am not coming to JNU because I have covered the time from roughly 1906 to 1975, that is emergency. And JNU was established in 1969, but teaching began in 1972. Therefore, I am not covering the JNU period. Now, what I wanted to present before you in the second section is the context of undivided India. Freedom movement was going on. There are again two histories. One traces from 1857 and the other says that no, not from 1857. The freedom movement in India began with the establishment of Congress Party by A.O. Hume in 1885. But as you know, A.O. Hume was not only a Britisher, but he was a very important bureaucrat of the Viceroy. And the person who became the first president of the Indian National Congress plenary was his private secretary, Umesh Chandra Banerjee. But very few intellectuals or citizens of Bombay attend the Congress Party. One of the young boy was Dadabhai Naoroji. Then when the second plenary session took place, he persuaded primarily the Zoroastrians of Bombay to attend the Indian National Congress session. The conservative nationalists were against this official Congress party, but Dadabhai Naoroji persuaded them to engage with a dialogue of the people associated with the Indian National Congress. When Dadabhai Naoroji took the lead in mobilizing the middle class of Bombay to participate in the movement, by 1890 he became the most important Indian leader of that Congress, which was still dominated by A.O. Hume and his employees in the Congress party. Now, during the same time, what is happening in Bengal? 1857 is over. The Indians under the leadership of Bahadur Shah Jafar were defeated, and from East India Company, India became a colony of the British Empire. Earlier, it was a company which was ruling over India, East India Company, and it was, competing with other East India companies by the French East India Company, the British East India Company, the Dutch East India Company, and the Portuguese, who were ruling over a part of India. As you know, the Portuguese, under the leadership of Vasco da Gama, had come first to Calicut, and then they came to Goa, captured it. Then they established many other towns like Basai near Bombay, and then they established the city called Bombay as we know it. It was a Portuguese town in the beginning, and before the Second World War, Bombay was not a very important town of India. The important towns of India before the Second World War were Calcutta, Lahore, Madras, followed by places like Kashi and Murshidabad. Murshidabad is not an important place now, but Lahore is important, Madras is important. Now, so far as the film industry of India is concerned, it began as the cultural wing of the freedom movement, primarily under the leadership of Bal Gangadhar Tilak. As you know, Bal Gangadhar Tilak he was a Pune man, and Bhandarkar Institute of Pune was there. Then it was known by some other name. What is common between Dada Sahab Phalke, Raja Ravi Verma, and Bal Gangadhar Tilak? The common thing is that three of them, people of three different generations, when Bal Gangadhar Tilak became the president of the Indian National Congress, he invited Raja Ravi Verma from Malabar to Bombay. And why he invited Raja Ravi Verma, who was not a political person, he was a full-time artist? Because Tilak realized we have already fought with the British in 1857 and we were defeated. There is no point in fighting with the British by the same medium of war. Through hardcore battle, you cannot defeat the British. In case you have to fight to win, you need some other weapon. Now, what will be that weapon? There is a private conversation which is captured in letters which Bal Gangadhar Tilak has written to Raja Ravi Verma. It is there in Bhandarkar Institute. Now, when I saw it for the first time, I could not believe. Raja Ravi Verma, a Malayali, and Bal Gangadhar Tilak, a Marathi. Can you guess? Can you make a guess in which language the letter was written and reciprocated? The letter was not written in English. The letter was not written in Hindi. The letter was written in Marathi and it was responded in Malayali. I did not know any of the languages, therefore I took the help of my friends in Pune who translated it for me. Now I said, how did they communicate with each other? Was Raja Ravi Verma familiar with Marathi? He said partly. And was Bal Gangadhar Tilak familiar with Malayali? He said partly. Pardon?
Malayalam.
Yeah, Malayalam, partly. I said then, how did they communicated? How did they understood each other? Then they said, you see the letters again. In the middle, there is a Marathi letter, but in the sides there are symbols. And in the response which Raja Ravi Verma wrote also, in the middle there is Malayalam letter, and in the sides there are symbols. In case you are familiar with the 1857 War of Independence, there are many good books now. Earlier also there were some manageable books. In 1857 also, Indians did not communicate during the British rule because there was censor of letters. The postmaster used to read it before delivering. Therefore, then also symbols were used. For example, there is a film also by Ketan Mehta, Mangal Pandey, and some of these symbols are used in that film also. Therefore, the letter was communicated, and then Raja Ravi Verma came to Bombay. Bal Gangadhar Tilak said, you have been painting since your childhood, and you have lots of paintings. And it is not being sold. Therefore, I am proposing you, the Congress party will manage you finance. And all your paintings will be reproduced by the press. Therefore, Bal Gangadhar Tilak, arranged a team in which Dada Sahab Phalke was an apprentice of Raja Ravi Verma. A photocopying machine was imported. It was called lithopress. And all paintings of Raja Ravi Verma were photocopied the way Chairman Mao photocopied American books during the Cultural Revolution. Illegal thing. Therefore, I am not indulging in the question of legality or rational legal. An overview which will help you understand the relationship between sociology and cinema in India. And what is the context in which Tilak Maharaj or B.G. Tilak is doing this? Let us see the rate of literacy in India. 1901 census, only 9.8% males were literate. I am not talking about educated. Literacy rate. Female, 0.6. Total, 5.4% in 1901. 1991, 10.6. From 9.8 in 10 years, the males were educated, 10.6, female 1.0, total 5.9. In 10 years, literacy increased from 5.4 to 5.9. This is the context in which Bal Gangadhar Tilak is trying to devise a narrative to fight with the British, the mighty empire of the whole globe. Tilak says that it is not through the printed word or the spoken word that a national narrative can be made. Why? Because there is no language which is understood by all Indians. There is no common lingua franca. There is no language which is understood by all Indians, even educated Indians. Therefore, he decided that although he was a well-educated person, although the print technology was very conducive in the rise of nationalism elsewhere, in Europe, in other parts, but in India, nationalism cannot become a really mass-based phenomena unless and until symbols are used. Symbolic communication is strengthened. And he was a very cunning person. Bal Gangadhar Tilak and Gandhi both were very cunning person. They are, devising some sort of a war with the British. But that war is not a very hot war. It is a cold war. Therefore, I am trying to submit that the term Cold War, which became fashionable in social sciences after the Second World War, was already a known word in Indian freedom movement. Cold War, through symbols. Therefore, what he did, all his paintings, Raja Ravi Verma's paintings, were made available almost to each corner of undivided India. Now, what next? He said, through this you can mobilize only the Hindu population, because Raja Ravi Verma's paintings were primarily about Hindu gods and goddesses. Therefore, he persuaded the Sufis of his acquaintance in Lahore to, because in Islam, in Sunni Islam, you cannot represent the Allah or the major things. It is haram. But the Sufis, they were veterans, they were masters of symbolic game. Song, dance, dargahs, and also some other things which I am coming very near to. Therefore, Bal Gangadhar Tilak, mobilized the Sufis to do the same what he has done for the Hindus among the non-Hindus. Now, among the non-Hindus, who were counted? Zoroastrians, because they were very important force in Bombay, and Muslims. Now, for the Christians, it was decided that they can be approached through church. And printed word will be sufficient because, although all Christians of India in 1911 were not illiterate, but they used to go to the church, and during the Mass, some of these elements were incorporated. Now, what is the source through which I am telling you this? A letter written by Pyare Lal to J.C. Kumarappa. J.C. Kumarappa was a Christian follower of Mahatma Gandhi. Now, I am not indulging in the debate that Congress party was divided between the moderates and the extremists, or the extreme nationalist or moderate nationalist, because Gandhi is supposed to be a disciple of Gokhale and Firoz Shah Mehta, who are therefore Nehruvian era, that is from 1949 to social. Actually, I have made a table. 1906-1948 Swadeshi movement, Jallianwala Bagh, and the two world wars. They are the critical events for Indian cinema. It is also critical event for Calcutta School of Sociology and Lucknow School of Sociology. But for Bombay School of Sociology, what is important? Caste, village, and joint family. But why? Because the chairperson of the sociology department is a geographer, town planner, Patrick Gates. And his important illustrious student, G.S. Ghurye, succeeds him, but there is a gap. Ghurye was a student of Patrick Gates at Bombay University from the beginning, that is 1919. And then he went to England and worked under W.H.R. Rivers. Therefore, he came with diffusionist ideas, whereas at Calcutta, as the name suggests, B.K. Sarkar is influenced by August Comte himself. Positivism and historical sociology is a very important popular branch of sociology, which was succeeded in 1930s by civilizational studies in a big way. Therefore, you have books of Radha Kamal Mukherjee, books which were written and published in United States of America, which was made available to us much later. Sickness of Civilization, Destiny of Civilization, Symbolic Life of Man. These are the books Radha Kamal Mukherjee was writing. And what D.P. Mukherjee was writing? D.P. Mukherjee was writing books like Sociology of Indian Culture, Sociology of Indian Music, and then Diversities. But what is significant is that both D.P. Mukherjee, B.K. Sarkar, B.N. Seal, Radha Kamal wrote only 2 essays, but they were bilingual people. B.K. Sarkar is writing in English and Bengali. B.N. Seal is writing in English and Bengali. D.P. Mukherjee is writing in English and Bengali. Iravati Karve is also writing in English and Bengali. Ghurye is also writing in English and Marathi. This man, A.R. Desai, is also writing in English and in Marathi. He is not Gujarati. I.P. Desai is Gujarati, but A.R. Desai is a Marathi. Therefore, the surnames do not implicate a geographical region. Therefore, what is happening is that some of the founding fathers of Bombay School are writing exclusively in English. For example, K.M. Kapadia, because he is a Zoroastrian, and his language, the Persian, the old Persian, is very fashionable. He is not very fashionable. Therefore, he is not writing in Gujarati. He is writing only in English. Dhirendra Narayan is also writing in English, but the others are writing in 2 languages. Therefore, two languages policy was a norm for the founding fathers of Indian sociology, and three language formula was a norm for the Indian state. But you know what happened? The South India faithfully followed this three language formula rule. But the North Indian betrayed the national movement. What is happening in most South Indian states? They are learning their mother tongue, which may be Malayalam, Telugu, Tamil or Kannada. They are also learning Hindi and they are also learning English. But what is happening in North India? The North Indians are betraying the freedom movement. What they are doing? They will learn Hindi, one language, Sanskrit, the other language, and English, third language. Some will read Hindi, one language, Urdu, the other language, and English, third language. No South Indian language was taught in Indian schools until very recently. And now some South Indian languages are taught, but then there will be no teacher. Therefore, Indian sociologists have not paid much attention to some of the critical events of Indian history, whereas Indian cinema is trying its best to understand and unite the Indian country and civilization. The type of, for example, take one incident, 1962, in the Indian-Chinese War, or 1971, these are very important events. But how many sociologists have worked on these two events? There are multiple of films in many languages on these two events. In the same way, there was much writing in European sociology about war before the two world wars. But after the Second World War, how many classics have been written about the war? But war is a very important theme for Italian cinema. War is a very important theme for German cinema. War is a very important theme for Hollywood. War is very important theme for Japanese cinema. War is very important theme for Chinese cinema. War is very important theme for Nigerian cinema. War is very important theme for Iranian cinema. There is no film industry in Pakistan, but they have a very developed television industry. Therefore, what I am trying to say is that to understand Indian society, we should treat cinema and sociology as complementary. There are strengths and weaknesses of the two institutions, two mediums. But of course, there is difference of respect, status. The status of cinema in India is much higher than the status of sociologists in India. And just to make you a little lighter, a very controversial statement. Cinema occupies the place of the Brahmins. The armament and military occupies the place of the Kshatriya. Indian state is the Vaishya. It has been controlling the economy and it is still controlling. Among the social scientists, economists are the Brahmins, followed by the historians, the Kshatriya. And what about sociologists? Sociologists became important in Indian state, but not in Indian society during 1950s. What happened? India became independent in 1947. Soon after, NATO approached Jawaharlal Nehru to join NATO. Jawaharlal Nehru said no. India will not join NATO. Then Pakistan was approached by NATO? And they said yes. Therefore, Pakistan is part of NATO since 1947. Liaquat Ali Khan said yes. I am unable to understand the same Nehru who said no to NATO proposal. He accepted the Ford Foundation proposal to study Indian villages. All village studies in India since 1950s has been funded by the Ford Foundation. And who took the lead? M.N. Srinivas, then in Baroda. S.C. Dubey and T.N. Madan. I do not know who persuaded whom. Nehru persuaded these sociologists or these sociologists persuaded Nehru. It is a fact that first 5-year plan of India, which began in 1952, was influenced by D.P. Mukherjee. K.N. Raj drafted the first 5-year plan and he was recommended by D.P. Mukherjee to Jawaharlal Nehru. But by second 5-year plan in 1957, there is a shift. P.C. Mahalanobis succeeds K.N. Raj and the emphasis shifts from village to town, urban city, and agriculture to industry. Now, why the Indian state is there is this mismatch between the 5-year plan and sociologists like S.C. Dubey. They are not. He is not only writing Indian village. He is also writing India changing villages, which is a study of CDP program, community development program. Therefore, S.C. Dubey and his student Yogesh Atal, he was sent to UNESCO. UNESCO chair of sociology was occupied by Dubey's student Yogesh Atal. He is associated with a state, Dubey and Atal. T.N. Madan is also associated with the state because Institute of Economic Growth had a larger role in the planning commission. And M.N. Srinivas, although he has been writing again and again that he is interested in impartial sociology. Sociologists should not play, a collaborative role either with the state or with the society. It should play as a mediating. It should play a mediating role between society and the state. Srinivas also mobilized large number of his students to do field work. Now, what is happening in India after the village studies program was funded by the Ford Foundation from 50s to 70s. A large number of sociology students are doing field work in villages. An impression is being created that India is a country of village, caste and joint family. Whereas Indian cinema during the same 50s, 60s and 70s is talking about problems of alienation, problems of marginalization of labor, problems of industrialists faced by the Indian state and the competition they are facing from the outside market. Therefore, there is a need to do collective work. The way our second generation people and third generation people did for village study, there is a need to study Indian society and Indian cinema to give a holistic picture of India today in the global village. Thank you.